I'd like to welcome you to our second public meeting for the US 34 and 35th Avenue interchanges. My name is Joel Hemisath. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Greeley. We're excited to be here tonight. I know it's a virtual. One of the things we've noticed with some of these public meetings is we've been able to actually engage more people through COVID, doing more of these virtual meetings. So it's been kind of a blessing in disguise in a sense. We always have a hard time engaging the public at times with our capital projects. And so this is one of the things we've kind of learned through the COVID and pandemic. So we're happy to see so many people here tonight interested in the project. The first meeting, we had over 300 people engage in our website, provide some feedback. So if you're a part of that, we want to thank you for that. And tonight we want to do something a little more in person. We have our CDOT team here. We're grateful to be partners with CDOT in moving this project forward. And then we have several consultants here to help answer questions. We want to be able to try to answer as many questions as possible tonight. So we got about an hour or so to help present some information to you, and then hopefully be able to answer questions for those that have any. So we'll talk about that process as well. I'd like to first start by thanking the citizens. They kind of helped get some legs on this project. In 2018, the City of Greeley did a sales tax initiative for our quality of life. And initially we didn't think that transportation was going to be necessarily at the top of the list, but it quickly became evident that the community was interested in transportation projects. And these two intersections were kind of at the top of the list for us. So they quickly rose up and gained some momentum. And so these were some of our top projects that came out of that. So through that sales tax initiative, we at the City of Greeley are looking to provide about half the funding for these interchanges as we move forward. So we're really excited to be in a good position. That's not a common place to be with the challenges with funding infrastructure these days. So we're real pleased to be in this position and to have CDOT come alongside us and start the design. So with that, some ground rules you can see here for the meeting. Your microphones are muted, but you can send us a chat question or comment, and then we'll try to do our best to answer those. If you're using the Zoom app to ask a question or comment or share an idea, if you're using the Zoom app, comment in the chat. If you called in over the phone, send us an email at the email here, us34infogreeley@gmail.com. And then after the meeting, we do have a project website, so look on the website. We'll record this and post it and still provide some feedback. So we'll put some answers to frequently asked questions out there and such. And then there's some other information we'll keep updating as the project moves along. So you can see there's an email and a phone number if you have questions or want to reach out to us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Matson with CDOT to introduce our team. Dan?
Thanks, Joel. And we, again, at CDOT, like Joel said, we're happy to partner with Greeley in this effort as we look at US 34, since that is a CDOT highway, and as it is an important part of the transportation in and through the city of Greeley, as well as connecting all through the Front Range, I-25 on the west and US 85 on the east. So we'll look to make some improvements along that. So again, my name is Dan Matson. I'm the resident engineer for the project. Joel, who's just speaking to you, is the Public Works Director for the City of Greeley. And then we have LJ Malliott, who's the project manager for the project. And then we have our consultant team, which is Craig Parent and Jason Boney and Cordell Brayley and Ed Parks. And so we appreciate all their help in this, and they're here to answer your questions as we move forward. So just a quick review of the agenda. We're going to do a project overview. So some of this is a little bit of a repeat from last time that we went through and so we'll kind of do an overview of how we got started, and we'll talk about the alternatives evaluated. And this is the level 2 analysis that we're in right now. We already, as we discussed, had a level 1 public open house, and as Joel mentioned, we were really appreciative of all your input, and that was utilized in our look at the alternatives. And then we have, we'll look at the recommended interchange alternatives, the results of our level 2 analysis, and we came up with preferred alternatives for each one. And then we'll talk about the next steps as we move forward into design and hopefully in the near future, construction of these as well. So we'll go right into project overview. And with that, I'll turn it over to Craig, I think, who's going to help walk us through the whole project.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And thanks everybody for joining. Last year, CDOT led a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, or PEL, for US 34 to better understand the corridor and the needs of our local communities. An overall vision for US 34 was created during the study. This specific project that started at the beginning of 2020 is within the Greeley Expressway portion of that larger corridor vision. And 35th Avenue and 47th Avenue were both identified as critical intersections for improvement in that expressway. The project team has analyzed traffic conditions and developed multiple interchange alternatives for each location, including ones that came from the PEL as well as others. We looked at the pros and cons of each design to narrow the alternatives down to 3 for each intersection. The rest of this presentation is going to cover how we determined which alternative to recommend based on screening criteria and, very importantly, the feedback we've received from you. We held the first virtual presentation in August to present our work on the project so far and gather your initial feedback. 3 interchange alternatives were presented for each intersection, and your feedback was very helpful for us to evaluate and determine a preferred alternative. Social media posts linked to the presentation were shared from CDOT's Facebook page and by the City of Greeley through its Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor accounts. By using these platforms, the presentation reached close to 5,700 people, which we were really excited about. 706 of those people engaged with the post and 355 people watched the video. We received comments through the social media posts and asked viewers to complete a survey following the first presentation so that we could gather specific feedback on how you interact with US 34 and how you would like the project team to prioritize design criteria. Most of the feedback we've received so far has been supportive, and there's a lot of excitement for the project and a strong desire for improvements that reduce congestion and improve safety. Next, we're going to look at how we've screened the various alternatives that we'll cover later. A lot of the factors that we consider when comparing different designs we're going to cover here. And in addition to reducing future congestion and improving safety, we also looked at ways to minimize impacts to surrounding properties and ways to protect the natural environment, such as wetlands, air quality, and endangered species. The primary goal of the project is to improve safety and relieve congestion, which we can all appreciate at both intersections. 47th and 35th have the second and third highest number of crashes in the corridor. Well over half of those crashes at both intersections are rear end crashes. And regarding congestion, traffic is expected to increase by more than 20,000 vehicles per day between now and 2045. Multimodal connections like the ones called out here on this slide have also been emphasized during design. Together, all these considerations contribute to designing infrastructure that can handle future growth in multiple modes of travel. Goals for reducing emissions and improving air quality are also important during design. Interchanges can certainly increase average travel speeds and improve free flow traffic. This ends up decreasing emissions because less vehicles are idling in traffic, and at the same time the time spent in traffic is shorter. And less emissions improves air quality and reduces long-term respiratory health risks. For this project, it can be expected that is, in the morning peak hour traffic congestion. Removing the signals due to constructing an interchange may reduce emissions from cars idling by approximately 0.01 tons. And while this may not seem significant, but a reduction like this obviously would accumulate throughout the day and over the course of the year, so it does add up. Here's the process we have followed for this project. The red arrow shows where we currently are, and the orange arrows show where we were when we had the first meeting back in August. Since then, we've done a detailed alternatives analysis based on public feedback and design engineering. We've looked at 6 screening criteria in more detail and used your feedback to set up a scoring system to select a preferred alternative for each intersection. Here are some of the things we considered when looking at each intersection and the screening criteria. For safety, we consider things like the number and severity of crashes, as well as bicycle and pedestrian safety. The survey feedback confirmed that many people don't feel safe to ride a bike or walk near either intersection. Regarding congestion, we look at how well the design reduces time spent sitting in traffic and how it improves travel time. Access to driveway and side streets are also considered. Environmental criteria may include impacts to noise level, parks, and as we just covered, air quality. Criteria for multimodal considerations includes maintaining bus routes, ADA access, and improvements to bike and pedestrian comfort. For property impacts, we look at how much space we need to design for each design and whether the project would need to purchase surrounding right-of-way. To make sure our design priorities are consistent with public preference, we asked survey responders in that first meeting to rank screening criteria from most important to least important. Here we are showing how the screening criteria were ranked based on that feedback. We used this information to weight the points for each design. Points given to the most important screening criteria were worth more points than those given to the least important categories. For example, safety is the most important screening category, as you can see here. So points given to safety are worth the most. We also used your feedback to help score each alternative, but we've also considered other comments and concerns that you provided in that survey. Many comments, like the examples shown here, have been supportive, expressing excitement and relief that work toward improving these intersections is moving forward. We've also received feedback encouraging us to continue to look at multimodal access, as well as transit improvements and prioritizing safety. Before we discuss the selected design for each location in detail, we're going to briefly go through 3 alternatives we've scored for each location, starting with 35th Avenue. All 3 alternatives here are interchanges with US 34 going over 35th Avenue with a bridge and would not have any traffic signals. This first alternative is a frontage road underpass with a loop, and in this alternative, US 34 would go over 35th with a bridge shown here in purple, and drivers would use ramps to get onto the freeway. Access from 28th Street to 35th would change with this design, but the red bus route, number 1, would not. When this interchange configuration was evaluated against the screening criteria, it ranked the lowest of the 3 alternatives, primarily due to poor scores for safety and property impacts. The second alternative here is a tight urban diamond with a loop. This alternative would have a longer bridge carrying US 34 over 35th, Drivers would use the ramps to get on the freeway like the previous design, but the northbound traffic from 35th Avenue would use the turnaround on the east side of the interchange to go west onto the freeway. Traffic on and off ramps would flow freely in this case. This design ranked second of the three, but the difference compared to the recommended design is its scoring on accommodating multimodal alternatives and safety. Our third option for 35th is a partial diamond interchange and loop. US 34 would also go over 35th with a bridge, and drivers would use ramps to access the freeway. The 28th Street intersection will have a 3/4 movement that eliminates westbound traffic or westbound left turns with partial signalization for both northbound and southbound traffic. The red bus route number 1 would stay the same for this option too. This option scored the best against the other two because it had the highest safety rating among all the alternatives, in addition to scoring on par or higher and accommodating multimodal options. The preferred alternative here at 35th supports multimodal facilities shown here and provides opportunity to expand multimodal integration in the future. This led to good scores in multimodal and future flexibility categories. The dashed lines that you can see here show where potential side paths, bicycle facilities, trails, and bus routes may be located and work within the interchange in the future. All the existing facilities out there today will be replaced in kind. And here you can see that pedestrians and cyclists will be able to use the signals on 35th to get across. So this slide shows a summary showing the scoring for the design alternatives at 35th. The second column shows how each category was weighted and correlates to the input we received from the public in the survey. The last 2 rows show the results of the scoring for each alternative. You can see that the tight urban diamond and the partial diamond loop are ranked very closely. The partial diamond loop exceeded the tight urban diamond in safety and multimodal accommodations to score the best and become the preferred alternative. So as you can see there, this is a really unique interchange configuration. So I'd like to pause and see if we've received any questions through the chat. So Ed, if you wouldn't mind, if we have received some questions, if you wouldn't mind sharing some.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Just to remind everyone, I know we got a couple functions here. So if we can do the questions through the Q&A function there you have at the bottom, that's the best way to get us the questions, because what we'd like to do is track these questions and make sure if we don't get to all of them in this hour or whatever time we have here, that we can get to them after the meeting, and we'll be able to present these questions and answers in a format that kind of takes away your name and everything, but gives the answer, and we'll post that onto the webpage once the meeting's over, maybe later this week or early next week. To kick things off, I might, this first one from Tim about the congestion, maybe if Cordell and Jason, if you could hop on this, but Tim's asking if he feels a lot of congestion could be improved by having adequate traffic light timing, which doesn't exist right now in these areas. Would be also helpful to add additional entrances and exits to Center Place Shopping Center, as well as T-Bone Ranch. Will these issues be addressed? I don't know, Cordell, maybe you want to address the traffic light timing, maybe hand it off to Jason for some of the access design comments here.
Definitely. Thanks, Ed, and thanks for the question. Yeah, so the alternatives that we've looked at definitely are meant to be to work together in terms of signal timing with other intersections. So in our traffic analysis that we performed, we're definitely taking that into account, and do believe that the alternatives that we'll be discussing tonight will work better in terms of signal operations. And I'll let Jason talk about the access questions a little bit more.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that too, I definitely understand your comment about signal timing. A lot of what we're doing here, though, is also planning for the future. So keep that in mind as we're going through the alternatives. Is we're looking for traffic volumes 20 years from now and being able to accommodate those with the interchange as well. And then as far as your question, Tim, on the accesses, our project is limited to the interchange and then running up 47th and 35th. So we're not looking at accesses at Center Place, along Center Place Drive, or for T-Bone Ranch. What I will say about the Center Place Shopping Center is part of what we're doing to make traffic flow through there a little bit better is we'll be reducing the access on 47th Avenue to a right in, right out only. So that is one access change that we're working on, but otherwise accesses along Center Place Drive will remain as is.
Thanks, Jason Cordell. Maybe Jason, why don't you stay on for a second here and just if you could address Matt's question here about in the presentation, it states that 35th and 47th Avenue are the number 2 and number 3 ranked intersections along Highway 34. I believe that's for the traffics. Which intersection is number 1?
Yeah, it's a good question. The number 1 is US 34 and Weld County Road 17, which is also an intersection that CDOT's working on in a separate project as well.
And then I think we had a couple questions here from Jonathan and Jediah regarding our cycling and walkability, multimodal options. I think you guys asked those questions before Craig got to the slide there about the multimodal options. If you guys have further questions based on what we presented in the slides, please get those up for us. We can maybe get to those a bit later. And regarding, Jason, this might be you again. Will the Excel facilities along 35th be undergrounded? It's awfully dark on the east side due to the inability to put up street lights under the transmission main.
Yeah, so there's a line running north-south that's a very large overhead electric line that is not going to be undergrounded. It's too big of a facility and too high energy to underground. The facility run in east-west along the north side of 34 we'll be looking at options there. There's a potential that we could be undergrounding a part of that. I know that's not probably the line that you're talking about, but there are some conflicts there with our ramp. So we're working through that until utility investigation now, and we'll be investigating that for the next couple of months.
Might just do one more before we move on, because we have another interchange to get through, and we'll have another period of question and answer here once we get through the second interchange at 47th. But maybe Craig or Jason, can you talk about our right-of-way impacts and how it may impact property value and what we're doing to minimize that here on the project?
Yeah, I can take that one. So each interchange is obviously a little bit different. So I'll start at 47th. Most of the right-of-way needed out there has been dedicated or approximately what we need. And you can see that out there just looking at Google Earth or Google Maps. There's some areas where there are setbacks for each of the different shopping centers or the neighborhoods. So we've got our setbacks there, and we're mostly going to stay within those. And then at 35th, in the southwest corner, again, that's been dedicated to accommodate our loop ramp. On the southeast corner, there's a cemetery. We will not be impacting that. We are doing everything that we need to do to make sure that there are no impacts with the cemetery and coordinating with them. Similar to 47th on the northwest corner of 35th and 34, most of that has been dedicated, so we're fitting our design within there. And then the northeast corner, we are leaving 28th Street in place as is, and that's been a big part of our alternatives analysis, is figuring out how to maintain two-way traffic on 28th Street, so there's not business disruption into those neighborhoods. And I think we've succeeded there, and we'll be fitting our interchange ramp within or between 28th Street and 34. So we're really doing what we can to minimize our right-of-way impacts here, and the city has done a good job as this area has developed to make sure that those developers are leaving the room that we need for the interchange. So Craig, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on there.
Yeah, I think you covered it well.
Okay.
All right, guys, we got about just about 30 minutes into our an hour-long meeting here. So I want to get through 47th, and then we can get to some more questions. Don't want to leave you all hanging, but like I said, anything we're not answering right now during this session, we will be answering and posting on the website afterwards. So Greg, why don't you take it over and keep us moving here?
All right, thanks, Ed. So now we're going to look at 47th Avenue and the three alternatives that were considered and talk about the preferred alternative. And similar to 35th, for all of these options, US 34 goes over 47th, and there will be no traffic signals on 35th. The first alternative is a single point urban interchange, or a SPUI. US 34 again goes over 47th, and the freeway is accessed from 47th using these ramps that you can see here. There'd be a signal on 47th Avenue in the middle of the SPUI under the bridge, which controls all the left turn movements. Traffic exiting the freeway would flow freely through right turn lanes channelized onto 47th Avenue. This design requires 47th Avenue alignment to be shifted and has the fewest pedestrian crossing points. Although this interchange is efficient from a congestion perspective, it scores poorly in the categories of access and also worse than the multimodal accommodations and right-of-way. The second place alternative here is a standard diamond with US 34 over 47th, with the bridges shown here in purple. 4 ramps would provide access to US 34, and signals control traffic on 47th Avenue where the ramps meet 47th north and south of the bridge. This design keeps 47th on the existing alignment and would not impact any access to surrounding businesses. This alternative ranked the lowest with safety and as well as multimodal accommodations compared to the other two. The preferred alternative here is this the innovative diverging diamond interchange, or a DDI. It ranked the highest because of how efficiently it meets goals to improve safety and congestion. It also scored best in the multimodal accommodations. The design here will give drivers direct access to the freeway ramps, so there will be much less sitting in traffic and waiting to get on US 34, which we can all appreciate. With the DDI, we can nearly double the number of drivers that will be able to turn left, and drivers will not have to sit and wait at signals, but will be able to flow freely onto ramps to access US 34. This design removes left turns across traffic and the crashes that can result from those left turns. It's also a flexible design that leaves room for future expansion as local travel demand increases. While the safety improvements here set the DDI apart from the others, it also scored well in both multimodal accommodations and future flexibility. Here you can see the existing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure at 47th. These dash lines here show potential transit and bicycle facilities that can improve multimodal access at the interchange in the future. All the existing facilities here will be replaced in kind. Similar to 35th, these are what we've shown here are the signals that pedestrians and cyclists will be able to use, as well as refuge islands to cross at each of these intersections. Here's a summary showing the scoring for the design alternatives at 47th. The last 2 rows show the scoring results, with the DDI ranked the highest, or ranked the best. The weighted grades were not as close between these 3 alternatives as they were at 35th. In this case, the DDI is more clearly the preferred alternative. As you can see, all three of them scored very well in the traffic operations category, but the DDI and the SPUI scored better for safety. It's also, you can note that the DDI and the SPUI tied with the best scores for the safety category, but the DDI had better scores for constructability and utilities, which resulted in the DDI scoring overall having a better score. So here we've got a short clip that CDOT developed to visually illustrate what a DDI may look like and how to drive in one.
You will stop at a traffic light. When the light turns green, you will simply follow your lane to the opposite side of the roadway. Be sure to stay in your lane and watch the roadway. For those of you looking to go onto the highway, stay in the left lane and look for the roadway to shift to the left. Remember, at this point, you would have traditionally been stopped at a traffic light with your blinker on. Instead, you are continuing to move on to the intersection and onto the highway. To continue through the interchange, stay in the center lanes. Your lanes will cross back to the right in their original pattern. If you want to enter the interchange from the right, stay in the right-hand lane. Okay. You will stop at a...
I knew I was going to do that. All right. Similar to 47th or 35th, 47th really is also, it's a unique interchange from a user perspective. And so we'd like to take a few minutes here again to take some questions. So Ed, what do you have for us?
All right, so just so we're clear with you guys putting up questions, I've been moving for 35th, I was moving chronologically, and I've kind of skimmed through here to jump down to what I see for questions around 47th. That doesn't mean I'm not going to jump back up. I'll jump back up to you guys in the next Q&A. But so I guess the most obvious one here is the preferred alternative for 47th and Highway 34 appears to have significant impacts to the GLIC Canal and Grapevine Headgate. How will this access and operations for GLIC be accommodated in this design? Is this something that, Jason, you can hop on and talk about this?
Yes, so that's similar to the overhead electric. We're working through our utility investigations now. What we're going to do is accommodate that, though. Make sure that the irrigation stays in place. Now what that looks like is what we don't know just yet. So it may be that it all goes underground until it crosses 34 to the west. But one way or another, we're going to be maintaining that system. And now it's just a matter of what it looks like, whether it's going to be, still the uncovered canal or an underground storm system.
Thanks, Jason. And in terms of, this is going to some of the design at 47th, maybe Carlos, you can help us out with this one. Carlos is one of our designers for the 47th interchange. Will any of the accesses on the south side of Highway 34 on 47th Avenue be closed or affected? For example, access to the car dealership?
No, right now we're not planning on closing any accesses. If anything, I know Jason mentioned earlier, some of them may turn into right-in, right-outs just to facilitate traffic on 47th, but no accesses are planned on being closed.
Thank you. And then also maybe you can take this one too, Carlos, is to clarify for option 3 on 47th Avenue, does not permit turns from 47th Avenue going north to Highway 34 going west.
Yes, we are not precluding any movements. It'll be a full functional interchange. So you'll be able to access US 34 in any direction from any direction on 47th. With the DDI, the difference is we'll shift all the traffic to the left side. So instead of having to stop and wait for cross traffic to clear, you'll be able to make a direct turn, eliminating that conflict point.
Same sort of, stay with you, Carlos.
Okay.
The DDI at 34 and 47th, how does the flow look for pedestrians moving east-west and north-south?
So for the north-south, what we'll be doing is we're going to have a sidewalk leading up to the interchange. And once you get up to the interchange, you'll be crossing to the middle. and then we'll have a bike pedestrian trail or bike pedestrian path running down the middle, and then once you get across 34, you'll cross back over. This will also provide connectivity to the trail that runs east-west north of US 34.
Maybe Jason, you could tackle this one. Is how long do you think construction will take? I know this is sort of forward thinking.
Trying to get unmuted here. This is probably a bad answer, but that's to be determined. And a big part of that is that we don't know if both interchanges are going to be constructed together. If they're constructed separately, I would say anywhere from 18 to 30 months would probably be an average timeline. If they're constructed together, that changes things, and what we're doing in between the interchanges. So that's a little bit of a moving target. And we're pretty early on in our design, so I'd be hesitant to give too accurate of an answer there.
I think you might have something similar to say here too, but can we just maybe, there's been a few questions here about cost. Can we talk about like where we are in the process in terms of design maybe, and how we get to costs and where we might, how that's been adjusted in each of the alternatives?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take that second question for the second part of that first. Is what we wanted to do is not let cost be a driver as part of this process initially. So when we went through our alternatives analysis, we wanted to identify the most important criteria. A lot of those kind of had a cost component to them. So we don't want to then let construction costs be a huge percentage of that. So in our scoring that you saw, there's not a construction cost component there. We wanted to use, safety and traffic and environmental, a lot of other factors that are going to be important in scoring. And then at the conclusion, in as a supplement to that scoring, we did develop some really conceptual construction costs for each of the alternatives. And for some of them, they were really tight on scoring. And at that point, construction costs become a consideration, but not a driver. So we do have some conceptual costs. And now going to the first part of that question is where we're at in the design process. We're in what CDOT calls an FIR design right now, which is once we submit, will be about a 30% design level. We've just started that here really in earnest in the last month, and that'll be going into probably springtime 2021 is when we'll be submitting our 30% plan set. And at that time, we'll have some updated construction cost estimate as part of our plan submittal. So hopefully that answers that question.
Maybe one last one here. Craig, maybe you can take this and then we can transition to kind of finishing up this presentation. We'll get to the next Q&A here, but I know like Jason was just mentioning, we're still working on like 30% design and so forth. Maybe can you talk about where noise mitigation may happen or how we'll address that in the project moving forward?
Well, I think, certainly on 47th where there's neighborhoods especially on that northwest corner, and then on 35th, the residential areas on the northeast, as well as the cemetery on the southeast. We do expect there to be noise walls to mitigate that. When we're getting into our final design, we'll be looking at noise studies and where those receptors are and how to best mitigate that for everybody around the project.
Great. So let's move into the next couple slides here, so we can get to the next Q&A section. So that's me, isn't it? So looking at the next steps, if you can move on to the next slide there, we're going to be looking at our project timeline and phasing like we were just discussing, and how Jason was mentioning there. As you can see, the first beginning of this year, we were really talking about focusing on starting the project, getting the traffic studied and looking at the interchange alternatives. Right now, we are at the preliminary design. We'll be looking to wrap that up in the first quarter of next year. And then we'll be moving into final design from there. with the idea that we'll be wrapping that up in Q2 of 2022. We do think, at the earliest, construction could start the Q4 of 2022. That's depending on the available funding, and would last for approximately 2 years, as Jason was talking about earlier. Next slide, Craig. And then we'd just like to remind you, it's been great being able to answer you guys' questions live and try and make this as interactive as possible given the pandemic situation we're currently in. We really do value your input, and we'd like to know some more of your thoughts. You can still message us if you have more questions. We don't get to everything through the email address we mentioned earlier. That's us34infogreeley@gmail.com. We do have a project phone number. It's 970-616-4008. We are recording this presentation, and it will be posted up on our project webpage. And you can go there. It'll be on the CDOT YouTube page as well. You can give us thumbs up, thumbs down if you really don't like us. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/GreeleyGov or facebook.com/ColoradoDOT, and at Twitter at ColoradoDOT at GreeleyGov. Go on to the next slide, please. Might just hang out here for, this is where we're trying to get to some more of these questions, but I'm going to leave this up while we answer the questions, unless we need to go to a slide that has more designs on it. This just has our, all of our information on here to keep us, you informed of what we can have and how you can get in contact with us. So I think we're going to move into some more questions, and I'm going to kind of scroll back into my little question box here to make sure we address the noise. Brad Shade is asking, I think this is for Brad, I think you're talking about 47th. So there's 2 stop signals close to one another north of the overpass and the number 1 design. Can you walk him through that a bit more comprehensively? Maybe if Cordell and Carlos, if you guys can address that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So 28th Street is really close to US 34, and accommodating all of the movements there wasn't possible in this design. But we are able to allow left turns from the north to enter into 28th Street. And we're able to do that by having the traffic signals coordinated and essentially working together with one controller. Whenever we have signals that are really close to each other, we're able to use one signal controller to control lots of movements using things called overlaps, where certain movements can occur at the same time. So that's what we would do here with these intersections that are located really close together.
Cordell, sorry, I think that question may have been for 47th. I still think that's really valuable info because I know we've gotten some questions on 28th as well. But Ed, if you could repeat that question, and then maybe Cordell, if you could talk about the signals on 47th.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I thought we were talking about 35th.
No worries.
So Ed, the question was about 47th Street and 2 signals.
I believe so, yeah. And I answered it and it got filtered out. So maybe just address how we're going to navigate the 2 traffic lights, one on the north side and one on the south side for the diverging diamond and their proximity.
Yep, so actually it's a very similar answer in this case as well. This signal would operate most likely with one signal controller, and there's different ways that it can be timed based on the time of day and where the heavy movements are. And we can, for example, we can prioritize traffic coming off of US 34 to get through both signals without stopping, or you can prioritize northbound or southbound traffic to go through without stopping. So this would be an operational thing that the city and the CDOT would look at, based on the time of year and the time of day, the day of the week, to really refine the signal timing plans to work. But the quick answer is, yeah, one signal controller would operate it to minimize the delay for the most amount of people possible.
I've got a multimodal question here. Maybe Marcus, if you could address this, help me address this one. It's it seems to be that there's most of our multimodal improvements have been labeled as potential. Will there be any walking, cycling upgrades for this project in this phase?
With the project, we are anticipating to upgrade the pedestrian facilities along both of the streets. So both 47th and 35th would have improved sidewalks, more to the standards of the city of Greeley's side path, and so it's a wider sidewalk essentially, and so that would be an improvement for both intersections going north-south along the local streets, and then the trail going east-west through the 47th. Currently, it actually goes both east and west of 47th, and so that's why the diverging diamond play is preferred here, because it allows that movement to happen much easier than some of the other alternatives. And then at 35th, we actually are looking at extending that trail along 34 to the east along 28th Street. So that would allow that layout to continue that trail going east at least to Reservoir Road as part of this upgrade.
Thanks, and I might just keep you here for a second because I think
Okay.
you know this one pretty well. Can there be an access point off of 34? There's only one way in and out of the shopping center, which puts more strain on 47th and 35th Avenue intersections.
So an additional access to US 34?
Yeah, I believe so. Anything,
Okay.
if we could add another access point besides the intersections so people can get in and out of the shopping centers without using the interchanges or the intersections.
Right. Really what that does is it just creates more complication with the ramps. So the short answer is no. Given that these two intersections are actually only about a mile apart, by the time you get onto a ramp, you're almost getting to the point where you're ready to exit for the next interchange. And so adding an additional ramp in there would just make that quite much more complicated.
Perfect. Thank you. And then, Jason, this might be a good one for you. Will there be any barriers or walls be put in place near residential property to block the increased visibility into backyards and increased noise?
Yeah, I think that probably goes back to Craig's, similar to Craig's noise question. So as far as walls or barriers, if we're talking retaining walls, we'll put those in where needed to make our grades work, right? So if we're filling, we'll put in a retaining wall if we need barrier to separate traffic. As far as a noise barrier, that's something that'll be coming in the future, and I think Craig covered that question a little bit earlier. If there's follow-up questions, we're happy to answer them.
Well, why don't you just stay there for a second? Because one of the questions, and since you mentioned grades, is are we going to have to change? Maybe explain what you mean by grades, and also like what they may change or stay the same in terms of looking at the corridor.
Yeah, good question. So when I say grades, I'm talking about the slopes of the road. So obviously to put in an interchange right now, they are at the same grade. So we would call that an at-grade intersection. That's what we have in both locations today. For both of them, at least where we're at right now, and we're working through a lot of the design. So we're getting a lot of information in right now, and this is a little bit fluid, but our plan right now would be for 35th Avenue and 47th Avenue to stay at their current elevations, and for 34 to go up and over both of them. And as we work through getting some utility information, we've got some substantial utilities and fairly large utilities in both locations. So we're just getting that information here in over the last couple of weeks. So there's a possibility that we could end up lowering one of the existing roads, but right now our plan is to leave those at their current elevations and take 34 over both of them.
Thanks. Cordell, can you talk about traffic and maybe like how we're planning to address the speed limits for US 34? And if it was going to stay at 65, or are we going to be at 55? Is there how do we address that?
Actually might toss that one over to Jason for as far as the design speed, what we're assuming out there for US 34.
So that's another, I feel like these are a lot of cop-out answers here, so I'm sorry, but I think what we're going with right now is we were designing 47th for 75 miles an hour, but we would still be posting it at 60 miles an hour. So what that does is just change some of the geometry of our curves coming into it. And then as you get to 35th, that would be going down to 65 miles an hour. And both posted at 60. What we've recently done as we've gotten further into design is we're reducing that design speed at 47th as well. So through this full corridor, we're looking at a 65 mile an hour design speed, which would mean a 60 mile an hour posted speed. What could change as we get through this design process is that's our ultimate goal, is to get this to 60 mile an hour posted. That may not be what it is on day one. So as we open it, we're looking at the life of the interchanges. So it may be that they're posted at 65 to start, and that's some of the details that we'll be refining as we get further along in design.
Thanks, Jason. Joel and Dan, maybe you can help me out with this one. You have a question about for the city and the state in terms of addressing the intersection of 83rd and US 34. Are there any plans to address that intersection?
I mean, I could try it. It's, again, a part of the CDOT intersection. I mean, it's on our radar. It was one of those identified in the Pell study. As development happens out there, we'll obviously see more impact. The city is looking at doing 83rd Avenue as one of its capital projects in the next 5 years. We're going to start working on it. It'll take several years to kind of build it out in phases. And part of that is looking at the intersection at 83rd Avenue and US 34. But doing a full interchange there is still probably decades down the road still. So it costs a lot of money. And right now our focus is at 35th and 47th.
Thanks, Joel. This might be a bit future focused and maybe too far ahead, but Chad's asking about how construction is going to be managed. And are we thinking about having construction addressed for both interchanges at the same time? Or is it going to be happening at the same time? He's saying restricted traffic on north side, both intersections at the same time, can't get out of Center Place either way. Do we have any thoughts and plans on that? That's something we can address from a CDOT and Greeley perspective. Dan, if you want to address that one.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I missed the previous question. It was cutting it out a little bit, but thanks, Joel, for jumping in on that. But as far as the construction goes for these two, part of it depends a lot on funding, as we've said in the presentation, and the funding that's available. Whether we can do them both together would be ideal, but it just depends on how that funding comes in for the construction phase on this. But like we said too, is it'll take about 2 years, I believe, and we would manage them together. And obviously one of the things is we always try to keep the traffic flowing, and traffic control is a primary part of our construction, is to keep everybody moving through the intersections as we do to the construction. So
thanks, Dan.
Was there anything else I needed to answer on that? Did that answer it?
I think so. I think you got it, the main points there. Maybe Jason, this is talking about some of the scoring and matrices we had there. So did we consider the phasing plans and constructability in our scoring?
Yes, we did, and that actually might be a better question for Marcus, because I know he's looked at that as part of the alternatives analysis. Marcus, would you mind jumping in on that one?
Sure. So yes, we did look at how we would build it. This has affected mainly the the 35th intersection or interchange, we're actually going to do a slight shift to US 34 through that interchange, and that would help us build the structure without impacting the traffic along US 34 during construction. So you can see that westbound bridge is actually shifted north of the current intersection. So that was one of the, and that helped us in a number of other design challenges, especially related to the cemetery. And then we also looked at the phasing of the interchange at 47th, and the plan there would be that we could construct the ramps first, and that would allow us to shift traffic onto those ramps while we're building the bridge, the 35th, or the 34th, the bridges for 34 going over 47th. So so the ramps actually would serve the purpose to run traffic, or the 34 traffic still through the intersection. So.
Thanks, Marcus. And look, I know we're right up at time here, so I think there's one more question here that I can maybe address, and then we can then we'll move into kind of closing this out here. So one of the questions was how they can get a copy of each of the preferred alternatives. Like I said, we're going to be, this video and us answering these questions and speaking with you all has been recorded. We will be posting this up on the webpage. Maybe Craig, if you, with the PowerPoint, if you go back to that last page with the contact details, that'd be great. Next, 2 more slides. There you go. So like I said, if you have more questions, we didn't get to everything. We're going to be posting these through the FAQ. It's going to be up on the webpage. Our that webpage is www.cdot.gov/project/US34 design study. If you want to have been thinking about this more after you watch the video and you want to give us some more questions, you do so at us34info@greeley@gmail.com, or give us a call at 970-616-4008. I think these are all great questions. I know you guys had some really detailed questions, which is great to see so much knowledge about what's going on out there. But I think at this point, we're going to kind of wrap this up and be respectful of everybody's time. And we'll be getting to the rest of these questions, like I said, and post them on the website. And just really want to thank you all for participating. I think we can close it out from there, guys.